Dozens of countries all over the world are constructing hundreds of nuclear power plants as they realize the importance of nuclear power, especially with the ongoing energy crisis. Welcome to our December 2022 uranium report, which will be the last one for this year. For monthly uranium reports as well as updates on a range of other assets, join us at myfinancesteacher.org. The link is down in the description. Today, as I did over the last several uranium reports, I want to go over the fundamentals for nuclear energy going into the future over the next 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years. And in the second part of the report, perhaps just for the members at myfinancesteacher.org, we'll have a look at more technical details of what's going on with the prices and what is the intermediate outlook over the next several months. So coming back to the longer term view, over the last 5 to 6 years, investments into additional capacity of electric generation has been dominated by solar power. That's the yellow section over here. And during the same period of the last 5 years or so, the second place in capacity additions was taken by wind power. There is a bit of a difficulty though with these intermittent energy sources. We're looking at the capacity factor. That's the percent of time the energy source actually generates electric energy. We see that wind is below 35% capacity factor and solar panels are under 25%. Looking at more details in Northern Europe, for example, in Germany, that capacity factor for solar energy is around 11%. That does create a bit of a problem, and in addition with a lot of other factors, including the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we see energy crisis developing all over Europe. This energy crisis brings realization that nuclear power is going to be crucial in finding the solutions out of the ongoing situation. Let me remind you that just 10 grams of nuclear fuel, that's just the size of a few small coins, contains as much energy as nearly 500,000 liters of natural gas or 454 liters of oil, or as much energy as 1 ton of coal. So with all of that realization, recently the EU Commissioner for Energy, Kadri Simpson, said that just in order to keep European capacity for generating electricity from nuclear sources, the EU will have to invest around $450 billion into maintaining those nuclear power stations. Without these huge investments, that's nearly $500 billion in investments, around 90% of existing reactors would be shut down sometime in 2030s. And with current climate concerns and the targets for lowering carbon emissions, nuclear energy again comes quite handy with those targets. Talking about carbon targets, the most recent climate change conference, the UN annual COP27, saw its first participation from nuclear energy, which, by the way, the nuclear energy that is, positively influences over half of the United Nations development goals. So at the recent COP27 in Egypt, we saw US Special Climate Envoy John Kerry emphasize that nuclear is the path to net zero, as in order to achieve that net zero target by 2050, a substantial expansion of the nuclear fleet all over the world will be required. US Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm also stated that there is no global solution to the energy crisis and no path to net zero without a reliable source of power, without energy security, without that energy being affordable and at the same time allowing economic growth. And she also emphasized that all of these requirements are actually met by nuclear power. Hence, a global realization of how crucial nuclear energy is going into the future over the next few years is outstandingly bullish, in my opinion. So for more details on the actual positions we take in energy, join us at myfinancesteacher.org. Moving on to the most recent data from the World Nuclear Association, let's have a look at these 4 numbers. Currently, we have 437 operating reactors all over the world, which is actually a smaller number compared to the number of reactors that are in the pipeline. We have 60 reactors under construction right now. That's a 14% increase in the number of reactors. We have over 100 reactors at the planned stage and nearly 340 reactors at the proposed stage. So again, over the next several years, if these proposed reactors move into the planned stage and these planned reactors start being built, that will more than double the number of reactors we have all over the world, which is clearly a bullish development in the longer term. All of these additional, never mind existing reactors, will need a lot of uranium, and the currently operating utilities do understand that as they start to increase their longer-term contracting. We had a look at this data with the members at myfinanceteacher.org about a month ago, and the new data by late November shows that long-term contracting, long-term purchases by the utilities for the year 2020 has increased to above 112 million pounds. That's substantially higher than any of the numbers we've seen since 2013. So looking at this chart, one might see periods of low contracting activities, as in early 2000s, periods of accelerated contracting activities, as between 2005 and 2012. And it seems that with this recent data coming up above 112 million pounds, we might be entering a new period of accelerated longer-term contracting activities, which again will be outstandingly bullish for the uranium price. Do you remember what happened to the uranium price at the beginning of this previous period of accelerated long-term contracting? Let's have a look at this chart. Back in 2005, at the beginning of this contracting frenzy, uranium price was under $25, and in a span of a couple of years, shot up all the way to $140. That's a 5 or 6-fold increase in price. Hence, in my opinion, remember that nobody knows the future, a new all-time high in uranium prices is just going to be a piece of cake over the longer term. Remember that now, unlike in the middle of 2000s, in addition to utilities, in addition to power generators, we have physical funds also purchasing uranium. Such funds as Sprott Physical Uranium Trust, Yellow Cake, and a new Kazakhstan-based uranium fund that's called ANU. Looking at the purchases by Sprott and Yellow Cake, we see that Yellow Cake purchases have stopped in the middle of the year, but Sprott purchases, while they have decelerated in the second half of summer, they spiked to 1 million pounds in September and since have decelerated again. But going into second quarter of 2023, these purchases by the physical uranium trusts might actually accelerate again, as ANU is expecting to raise $100 million in Q2 2023, with an additional $400 million after that. And there is a chance that they might even end up with more money in their hand for the uranium purchases, as in the first round of financing, while ANU expected to raise only $5 million, they actually raised $74 million. So there might be substantial investor interest in uranium sector over the next several months. Talking about Kazakhstan, recently there was a study, there is an analysis coming up from JP Morgan with their view at Kazatomprom. That's one of the largest uranium producers in the world, where they suggest a price target of around $36 per share. That's actually significantly higher. That's somewhere around 28 to 30% higher compared to the ongoing share price of only $29. So JP Morgan, as well as Bank of America, as I mentioned in one of my recent uranium reports, are bullish on uranium sector as well. Next, let's have a look at this chart, prices for uranium enrichment, conversion, as well as the uranium price itself. The uranium that the producers extract from under the ground first need to be converted, then enriched before it can be used in power generation. And looking at the charts, it seems that during the second half of this year, the price pressure moved downstream a little bit. We see that in the middle of 2022, conversion prices increased from under $30 to over $40. And more recently, just over the last couple of months, the enrichment price has rallied substantially from just around $90 to over $120. So there is a pretty good chance that perhaps over the next few months, this pricing pressure might move upstream towards the uranium price itself, which is in green. So as the downstream prices are rising over the last few months, perhaps uranium price will have to do some catching up in the first half of 2023. And all of that, of course, will be very beneficial to producers such as Kazatomprom, as mentioned by JP Morgan. By the way, talking about these studies and analyses, the Department of Energy relatively recently published a new study where they state that perhaps hundreds of retiring coal plants, that's at least 157 that have already retired and 237 that are operating at the moment, might be converted to nuclear power stations with the convenience of the grid infrastructure being present around them already. So if that were to take place over the next few years, that would add substantially to the demand for uranium. These potentially additional nuclear reactors aren't taken into account in this pipeline as of yet. And another recent very interesting study is the World Economic Outlook for this year from the International Energy Association, which suggests that nuclear energy might grow to above 5,000 terawatt hours in 2040, considering that currently the world produces under 3,000 terawatt hours. That's nearly doubling of the current generation capacity over the next 17 years or so. And that would be a very bullish outlook, but again over the longer term. Next, moving on to what's been happening all over the world, starting with UK and Canada. UK government is funding and Rolls-Royce is building 16 new reactors. The plan is still at its early stage. For now, the locations of 6 reactors have been identified and perhaps the construction should start sometime next year. In other UK developments, the UK Economy Minister, Jeremy Hunt, recently mentioned that the state will sign contracts, perhaps even sometime in coming weeks, to get the Sizewell C nuclear reactor off the ground, which is expected to produce perhaps up to 7% of UK's electricity. So all of this does add up to the bullish developments in uranium sector, but again, remember this is a longer-term view, with the reactor perhaps starting its operations in 2030s. Moving on to Canada, recently at the beginning of last month, Canada recognized nuclear as clean energy. That is amazing and follows the recent EU taxonomy from earlier this year, which also classified nuclear energy as sustainable. All of those are outstandingly bullish developments. And this classification as clean energy in Canada allows for tax credits to nuclear generators, potentially pushing demand for uranium that much higher. Moving on further to the east, again from November, Romania announced that it wants to borrow over $3 billion from the US to build a couple of reactors in its already prolific region of Chernovoda. That's just yet another sign of growing demands in the future. Supply might grow as well, though, with Uzbekistan planning to double its uranium production by 2030. That's over the next 7 years. Uzbekistan is the top 7th uranium producer, currently producing around 3,500 tons of uranium per year. So the supply of uranium might expand alongside demand. But there are noticeable signs of demand expanding significantly more over the next few years. China, for example, keeps buying more and more uranium, as they did in early November from Cameco. That's despite China already holding relatively significant inventories of uranium. Why is that? Well, the reason is that China is planning to build a future uranium hub near its border with Kazakhstan. And if you look at their projections, just into 2026, that's only a few years away, they plan to have 23,000 tons of uranium at that uranium hub, or the strategic reserve, as they also call that. That's substantial. That's equal to the annual production of the largest producing country of Kazakhstan. and that would involve continued huge purchases by China over the next few years. Moving on to India, more expansion of demand here as well. Currently, India produces around 6.7 gigawatts from nuclear energy, and they have 8 reactors under construction, which will double that generation, adding another 6.7 gigawatts. India also has 12 reactors at the planned stage, adding another 8.4 gigawatts, and another 28 reactors at the proposed stage, with an additional 38 gigawatts. And moving further east to Japan, Japan plans to convert decommissioned nuclear plants into new reactors. That's a very interesting development. After Fukushima disaster, Japan decommissioned 21 of the 54 reactors they had. And not only have they restarted some of the remaining 33 reactors already, they do plan to restart more of those. That's by middle of next year. In addition to that, even the decommissioned 21 reactors, they plan to convert them back into modern new generation reactors. Again, adding that much more to the demand for uranium. And talking about Japan, recently we discussed with the members at myfinanceteacher.org that for the first time in years since the Fukushima disaster, the majority of the population in Japan is now in favor of restarting the remaining reactors that are still dormant. So the support for a cheap and reliable source of energy is growing. And by the way, it's growing not only in Japan. Looking at Europe, we have data on Sweden, Poland, Germany, Finland, UK, and Denmark here. Again, the majority of respondents do support nuclear power. Green bars is the percentage of respondents supporting nuclear power, red ones against, and gray ones undecided. In summary, the longer-term potential for nuclear power is quite promising, and for the intermediate outlook on the price technicals, join us at myfinanceteacher.org. where we publish these monthly uranium reports as well as regular updates on a range of assets. Have a nice day, a very festive mood for the upcoming New Year celebrations. Share a bit of that mood with me by hitting the like button and sharing the video with your friends. All the best, bye bye.